Hello and welcome to the state of Kentucky. I'm Bruce Maples, publisher of Forward Kentucky, and we're glad to have you with us today. If you are watching us live, I simply want to remind you that if you comment on Facebook or YouTube, we can see those comments and we might show them in the broadcast. A couple of housekeeping things to deal with before we get on with the show, and I'll probably do these again later in the show. One of the things we're wondering is if there's a better time, a day or time to do this. If you have a suggestion about that, you can send that to tips@forwardky.com. I thought Fridays at noon would be a good time, but I'm not sure it's the best time. So if you have an idea about that, let me know. Another thing is that we have free newsletters, a number of them. One of them being My Old Kentucky Podcast newsletter, and we're going to be joined in just a minute by somebody from that wonderful podcast. So if you want to sign up for some newsletters, go to that website, forwardky.com/email, and you can sign up for all four of them or just one of them or whatever you would like. So let's talk about this week. It looks like we're going to have a new president in January based on some of the returns, which is good news. And it looks like there's a possibility still that we could take back the United States Senate, or at least I should say tie it up based on the runoffs in Georgia. But it also looks like here in Kentucky, Democrats got walloped. And I don't think any of us saw that coming quite like that. If you look back on the website, we had Trent Garrison on last week, and he put together an article where he had predictions based on various metrics he was using. And Trent said that the two extremes would be that the Republicans would pick up 8 seats or that the Democrats would pick up 8 seats. He sort of thought there were 3 or 4 Dem flips in there. Turned out not to be true. Robert Kahne said basically the same thing in his My Old Kentucky podcast newsletter and on his podcast. And he and Trent agreed on a lot of that. And no, didn't happen that way. So let's bring Mr. Kahne in here. Robert, welcome to the state of Kentucky.
Thank you very much, Bruce, for having me.
So you are my stats and maps guy. Stats and maps. So, I mean, just to put it real bluntly, what happened?
Well, Democrats lost, it looks like probably 13 seats in the Kentucky House and lost 2 seats in the state Senate, and will be entering the session in 2021 with the smallest caucuses. I think I saw that Joe Sonka had asked Al Cross to look it up, and I think it's like 1975 since a caucus has been that small in either chamber of the legislature. So yeah, just a complete wipeout by Democrats, and yeah, that's the upshot of what happened.
So there was some hope that maybe 2018 indicated some paths forward, and certainly Andy Beshear's win, as you did a really good job analyzing, looking at the coalition that he put together, and that might hold, and maybe we could expand on some of the suburbs. I'm sure that you have looked at numbers and stuff since then. So what happened to some of those trends? Was the Beshear thing that much of a one-off, or were some of these races still indicating that there's some movement there?
Yeah, I will say, Bruce, that a lot of people were looking at that gubernatorial map from 2019 to predict, where Democrats might be strong going into 2020. And I'll put myself as one of the people who is very optimistic that we could use the catapult from the gubernatorial race to predict and maybe identify some seats that could be targeted. Now, if you look at the Attorney General's race from 2019, essentially the exact same map occurred, where the only seat that the Democrats, all 13 seats that Democrats lost were seats that Daniel Cameron carried in 2019 over Greg Stumbo. The only one that he didn't carry in 2019 or that he did, excuse me, the only seat that he did carry in 2019, which he did not carry in 2020, or that Republicans didn't carry in 2020, is Angie Hatton's seat, which of course she didn't have a challenger. So that was an uncontested seat down there in Whitesburg. And yeah, basically every other seat, I'll read them off for you really quickly. The 100th, Tara Branham Clark, Kathy Hinkle in the 96th, Chris Harris in the 93rd, Cluster Howard in the 91st. Some of these have retired, so they aren't the Democrats who are running, but John Simpson in the 70th, Joe Gravis in the 56th, Maria Sorolis in the 48th, Rick Rand in the 47th, Russ Meyer in the 39th, Wilson Stone in the 22nd, Jim Glenn in the 13th, Rob Wiederstein in the 10th, and Dean Shawmore in the 10th. So, every single one of those seats was carried by Daniel Cameron in 2019. Of course, that was not the case in the gubernatorial race. So if you're looking at something a little bit more generic, I don't think anybody would look at Daniel Cameron now as a generic Republican with all the year that we've had. But, if you look at a generic Democrat versus a Republican in the Attorney General's race as opposed to a much more high-profile gubernatorial race, that was certainly the playing field that we were dealing with here in 2020 for the Kentucky legislature.
So the flip of that then is that as much as we appreciate the fact that Andy Beshear won the governor's race, that was an anomaly, based on the state, the way the rest of the races went.
I don't think that. I think, maybe. I think it's fair to say it was an anomaly, but I think every election in some kind of ways is an anomaly. Every election is a little bit unique and deals with something a little different. I think Andy Beshear really overperformed, the baseline of what you can expect as a Democrat, whether that be because of his opponent or because of the race that he ran. I think there's a little bit of both in there. But I do think that, the Kentucky voter, on average, in a lot of these districts, is more likely to opt for a Republican instead of a Democrat without being given a good reason. And I think you see a lot of the seats that were lost were retirements, where people in those communities knew those people very well and were willing to return them back. And then when they retired, they didn't know their challengers or the new folks nearly as well, and saw the D next to their name and penciled in for the Republican. You also saw some places where Democrats were stronger in the midterm. So it's highly likely that the electorate in 2020, given the presidential race and Donald Trump having quite a bit of a pull, some coattails in 2020, I think is fair to say, is one of the main reasons that that many of those people won. I think, and far be it for me to be too optimistic right now, but Democrats were competitive in a lot of these seats in 2018, and I think, in 2022 in a midterm, given a lot of things that might happen, the electorate being different, of course, is a long way away. I don't think that there's any reason to give up on a lot of these seats. I think that a lot of them will continue to be competitive, and honestly, it's a little hard to be any fewer than 25 seats. Now, we have redistricting on the horizon, and that could really throw a kink in things. So there's a lot that needs to be figured out. But I think a lot of the voters in these districts, at least, are not ones that Democrats should give up on by any stretch of the imagination.
Were there any of the losses or wins that surprised you significantly?
Yeah, there's several places. I think the ones that really kind of surprised me was the weakness in the suburbs. And that's where Democrats really expected to be a lot stronger. So like Stan Lee's former seat in Lexington, I thought that the seat that Ryan Alexia, as the Democrat, was running in Northern Kentucky in the state Senate was a very gettable seat. I really expected the Jason Nemus Margaret Plattner seat contest to be a lot closer. Kevin Bratcher and Suzanne Kugler. I thought that a lot of the suburban seats in Louisville and Lexington were likely going to be a lot closer. And I was really expecting a lot of these retirements for Democrats out in the state to be lost, but I thought that those losses would be mitigated by flips in the suburbs, and that just didn't happen. And again, if you go back to the Attorney General's race, a lot of those people in those suburbs did opt to vote for Daniel Cameron instead of Greg Stumbo. Now, that's just kind of what it is. I think that the national trends do show us that suburban voters are more likely to vote for Democrats than they were in the recent past. And I think that trend will accelerate And so I think, again, those are places where Democrats will continue to be competitive. So that was my first biggest disappointment, was the weakness in the suburbs after a lot of high hopes for Democrats in a lot of those seats. The second biggest disappointment for me was really the collapse in smaller cities. That's another place where Democrats have shown some strength. I don't have any precinct level data because of the way that this election worked. It's not available. There wasn't really the concept of a precinct. You didn't really go vote in your precinct. You went to go vote at either the county clerk's office out in the state or whatever. So that data is going to be tough to come by, but I'm trying to figure out a way to get to it. But anyways, the weakness in, Rob Weiderstein losing in Henderson, Terry Brandon Clark losing in Ashland, the Owensboro seat was also lost. And I thought Democrats might have a shouting chance to win in Paducah or something like that. The Pikeville seat also lost. A lot of these smaller cities, which have often been represented by Democrats, in which there was some strength for Democrats in the gubernatorial race, those were lost as well. The one city outside of Louisville, Lexington, and Northern Kentucky that did, in fact, stick up for Democrats was Bowling Green. Patty Minter didn't draw a Republican challenger, but did win with 70% of the vote versus a Libertarian. So, it certainly is something that's quite disappointing, that both in the suburbs and the small cities that Democrats were as uncompetitive as they were.
There was a lot of theorizing that high turnout favored Democrats. It looks to me like the high turnout was Republicans.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the case. 2018 was a much lower turnout election, and 2020 was a much higher. 2020 and 2016 were higher turnout elections given the presidential race, and they did certainly favor Republicans. Now, turnout is high turnout or a low turnout. We're just looking at the total number of people turning out to vote. Electorates can be different, right? You can have high turnout because more conservative people showed up to vote for Donald Trump, or you can have high turnout because more people turned out to vote for a Democrat. That happened in 2008. Kentucky was significantly more Democratic than expected. Of course, Barack Obama didn't carry Kentucky, but it was a high turnout election because people were excited to vote for Barack Obama back in 2008. And Democrats did, in fact, increase the majority, I believe, in 2008 in the House. I think that's correct. So, that was high turnout. This was high turnout, but of course the people who turned out were different. So I don't think it's a smart idea to just say high turnout favors one group or another. It's what's causing the high turnout and how did that happen? So that does look like what happened in 2016 was that the high turnout favored Republicans. So
I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute and say, okay, I'm going to wave my magic wand. And I'm going to make you chair of the Democratic Party in Kentucky. If you were suddenly the chair of the Democratic Party, looking at what just happened and where the state seems to be going, what are the first 2 or 3 things you would do or focus on?
I would probably quit and put somebody else smarter in charge, first of all. But if I were running the show, I think as Democrats, we really need to take a headlong look at where we are. I think that, it's going to be a really hard time to really get people to change their minds fundamentally about what they value and what they think is important in a government. So I think that we have to find a way to marry the concerns of the base voters of the Democratic Party and urban areas. A lot of the remaining Democrats in the legislature didn't even draw challengers because they were so assured of winning. So we have basically a base that we need to listen to the concerns of and understand why they're Democrats. But then we need to find ways to marry the concerns of the people in the base to the concerns of people who look at Democrats and see something that they don't like. A lot of people say we need to ignore the concerns of the base and focus on the concerns of the people who are outside of the base. Or vice versa, or just or just be thinking about the concerns of the base. But I think that we have to figure out a way to kind of merge those two things together. I don't think, based on my experience, I know people from all across the state. I have friends and family across the state. I don't think the concerns of people are fundamentally different no matter where you are. If you're an urban person or a rural person, I think everybody wants good schools. They want a good job. They want to make sure their kids are taken care of, and they want to make sure that they have the chance to have a good and wholesome life. And the thing is, the way that we talk about things has gotten so out of kilter. And I think one of the jobs that we need to do is find a way to take the concerns of our base, make sure we're listening and addressing those, but find a way to talk about all of the things that people have in common that they're concerned about, and have a unified way of talking about it so that we can meet the needs of everyone. How you do that, of course, I'm not the chair of the Democratic Party because I don't know how to do that. So that's I think what the challenge is going forward.
We've got a question, or a comment, I should say, in our Facebook viewers talking about what can we do to get the message out. The Democratic Party platform doesn't trickle down. People don't know about it. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I think that basically people put forward a message, like people who are forming the message, they understand. I just kind of think that the mindset of people who are doing the messaging is, for whatever reason, not meeting the minds of the people who they need to be receiving the messaging. And I think that the message is definitely going out, and I think people are hearing it, but I don't think the message necessarily addresses the concerns that people have. And I don't know why that is. I wish I did. I said on my show a couple weeks ago, I was like, I don't understand why anybody would ever vote for Donald Trump. I still don't, honestly. I mean, I've been sitting here for 4 years watching this man do his thing. And I just can't put myself into the place of understanding why anyone would ever vote for him.
Right.
I think, after thinking about it after this election, that's probably a flaw. Why can't I conceptualize that? What is it about these people that I don't understand that we need to vote for us? Like, they're clearly seeing the world in a fundamentally different way than us that we don't understand. And I think that understanding and figuring out why people find that message so attractive will help us to understand what about our own message and what about the message that we're trying to tell people would resonate better.
I think that's an interesting thought, and I've been giving it a lot of thought myself. And one of the things I'm trying to figure out, and in fact, I'm probably going to write a post about it before Monday, is the different kinds of people who vote for Trump. And some of them I think you can talk to, and some of them maybe you can't. So I think we have to think about that. Go ahead. You were going to close with something?
I hear what you're saying, and I tend to agree with you. But the problem is that group of Trump supporters who, you can't talk to, that may be a large enough group in Kentucky to get you to 60 House seats or 65 House seats. So without trying to penetrate that a little bit, in at least the near term, I mean, long-term organizing is something that's a lot deeper, that you can start thinking about different sorts of ways to get around that. But if you want to do something about the immediate term, when we're facing probably the most conservative government that we've ever had in Kentucky, we're going to have to find a way to penetrate that. I just don't think that there's a way around it.
I agree, and I don't want to end on a discussion that takes another 25 minutes or another
Sure.
weeks. I think that your point earlier about the current Democratic base, I also want to say the current Democratic value set, and how do you work at reaching people who voted for Trump and for Republicans and still maintain your values? And how do you get that across? And I think that's going to be a hard discussion we're going to have.
Yeah, it absolutely is. You're exactly right.
Robert Kahne, one of my favorite analysts, one of the people I love having on the show. And by the way, everybody, if you don't subscribe to the Mild Kentucky podcast or listen to it on the website or sign up for the newsletter, then you are missing out, because they do great work. Robert, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Bruce. I appreciate it.
So Robert gave us some good food for thought, and looking at what happened. Now we're going to talk to somebody who has to deal with what happened. We're going to bring in Representative Joni Jenkins, one of my all-time favorite people, who is here to talk to us about, oh my goodness, now I've got a super majority plus 10 or whatever it is in the state house. Representative Jenkins, welcome to the state of Kentucky.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, I guess.
Yeah, it's like, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the play? You might need to speak up just a little bit or get
Okay,
closer
I
to
will
your
try.
mic.
I will try to.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's just talk about where you are, where your leadership is. What are you thinking after Tuesday? First of all, let me ask you this: were you surprised? Was it a shock?
It was a shock. We knew this was going to be a challenging cycle for Democrats. We knew that with Donald Trump running, we've seen how he runs in Kentucky. We had polling that showed us he was going to run very well in rural areas. So we knew it was a challenge. I had kind of girded myself to say we were going to lose maybe 6 seats. I thought our incumbents were in good shape. I thought those suburban, certainly the open seat in Lexington, we thought was we had a really good chance of picking that up. We thought we had a really good chance of picking up a couple things in Louisville.
Mhm.
So it was shocking. It was a shocking night for us all. Polling did not indicate those problems whatsoever.
There were a couple. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I want to let you answer this. Which ones of the losses? Which ones were really the biggest surprises to you?
Rob Wiederstein out in the West. Dean Shamore. Dean was in a very conservative area, but he was one of our more conservative members. He worked really, really hard. I always had the feeling that his constituency really, really cared a lot about him. And let me tell you, during this unemployment crisis, no one worked harder for their constituents than Dean Shamore. Maria Sorrells, everything was indicating to us that that was going to be a district that would undecideds would break toward Democrats, and they didn't. That one, we're still, keeping our fingers crossed a little bit on that one. They're still counting, absentee ballots there. The margins are slim, so that one could break back our way. Kathy Hinkle's race in Grayson, Lawrence and Carter, she won a Republican seat by 6 votes in 18. We knew we had an uphill battle there. But gosh, what a good legislator she was. Really worked hard for her district. That's what's, really heartbreaking, I think, for those of us who are, left behind. Terry Branham Clark did an excellent job in Ashland. That had been a Democratic seat for a long time. Those are hard. They're hard. They're hard to say goodbye to folks. Jim Glenn's seat has bounced back and forth and been close. So that wasn't a huge shock to us. We thought he was in much better shape this time. So,
okay. I'm just going to ask this very quickly. I don't have anything backing it up, but have you heard of anything funny about any of the voting or the tallying, or any suspicion at all that anything was funny?
No, I have not heard that. I think our county clerks across the state did a really good job, and I give a lot of credit to our Secretary of State, who's a Republican, for his work with our Democrat governor. In fact, the House caucus wrote out voting reforms a few weeks ago, and in our conversations with him, I think he agreed with about 95% of what we had in that. So, I don't fault that at all. I think, and it's, spent the last couple of days, looking backwards, and, we had a message that we polled of the Democrats were fighting for working families and for affordable health care and for public education. And, those messages were polling really, really high all across Kentucky. I think I think the majority party and their allies, which had deep pockets, picked a couple of things, and one of them was the protest here in Louisville. I think they really embellished that.
Oh, yeah.
And about a week and a half before the election, I was in East Kentucky in Grayson, where Kathy Hinkle. She had a little event there, and we social distanced and did all the safety things. But we attended that, and I was taken aback because one of the volunteers there said, "Oh, you must be so glad to be out of Louisville." And I said, "Well, I love coming to East Kentucky. It was a great ride down." And she goes, "No, don't you feel safer here?" And I kind of looked at her, and she said, "Well, they're burning down your city." And I'm like, "Well, no, they're really not." I said, "It's been 95% of the time it's been a peaceful protest. There's been some isolated incidents, mostly by outside agitators, but no, I don't feel unsafe in Louisville. And no, they're not burning the city down." But that, given the campaign rhetoric from the other side, the mailers, the radio ads, the TV ads,
right.
Fear is a huge motivator, and fear is I think motivates people more than hope does. We were offering hope, and the other side was offering fear, and I think fear won out.
So let's talk about the session, as much as we might not want to. Now we've gone from a supermajority to I don't even know what you call it.
I call it a super duper majority.
Super duper majority. I like that. That's good.
Well, when I came into the General Assembly 26 years ago, there were about 70 Democrats.
Right.
So we had a super duper. And let me tell you, it's hard to keep 70 people happy.
Yes.
It's a lot of cats to herd. And the majority, they don't need us for anything. They've got enough votes to do whatever they want to do. But they have a lot on their plate. They have to do a balanced second-year budget with real uncertain revenues at this point.
Yeah.
And, regardless of how people voted in this past election, they want their public schools funded. They want corrections funded. They want their Medicaid funded. They want their roads built.
Right.
And it's going to be a really, really austere budget, I believe. Unless they're in the revenue raising, which we've never seen the Republicans be in favor of raising revenue.
Right.
The road plan is woefully underfunded, and that has a lot to do with technology. Cars are, it's based mostly on the gas tax and the amount of gas that people are buying. There's been a lot of technology in cars. They get better mileage. There's been a whole lot more electric cars. And during this pandemic, a whole lot less miles have been driven. And, the consensus would be to raise the gas tax. And are there, 15, 16 new legislators going to run a vote for a tax their first time out?
So do you wind up just sort of sitting back and saying, "Great, y'all go to it.
Y'all broke it, you fix it."
and then shoot out into the sidelines, or what?
I think I don't have a caucus that I think is going to be willing just to sit back. I think those folks ran for a reason. They ran to do what they think is best for the state of Kentucky.
Right.
I think that there will be times that we will agree and we will work together. 80 to 90% of the things that pass with bipartisan votes. There's just a few issues that we disagree on. But I also think that our role as the super duper minority is to hold them accountable and to, offer that loyal disagreement and point out the flaws in what they're doing. And I have, again, it's a smaller but still amazing caucus of really, really talented legislators, really, really caring, and they're not a bit shy. So I look, the only thing that I think will maybe a challenge. Well, there'll be a lot of things that are a challenge. One of the challenges for us will be this pandemic and how we conduct business. Numbers are escalating with the virus, and I certainly want to make sure that all 100 members, which includes my caucus, are able to legislate safely. And what we saw in the last session when folks were not on the floor, it really, really does put some barriers and challenges to real robust debate. And I think we need some robust debate this time. So, we will be trying to be innovative and creative in how we do that, but yet keep people safe.
So my last question, or set of questions, I guess I should say, is about the future. Mm-hmm. Just like I think you heard me ask Robert, I'm going to wave my magic wand, make you chair of the Kentucky Democratic Party.
What did I ever do to you?
And say, okay, if you were planning what to do, we don't have an election next year. Mm-hmm. So we have 14 months, 16 months, maybe from now, mm-hmm. to make a difference. So what would you do? What would be your plan? How would you work it?
Well, I hope, one, I won't be party chair, but what I hope happens is that Leader McGarvey and his crew, my crew over in the House, that we and whoever, there is a vacancy at the party, that we will be having a new party chair. Ben Self has announced that he has fulfilled his commitment that he made when he came on, and that he will be leaving. I think by the end of the year. I can't remember now what date he gave us, but there's going to be a vacancy there, so there will be changes there. I hope that we can all get together and use this 2021 year as an opportunity to kind of navigate that Robert talked about, that how do we address the base that we have, and that is mostly the urban legislators in Louisville, Lexington, Bowling Green, and some parts of Northern Kentucky. How do we sync that with rural voters? I believe that we have much more in common than we have not in common with folks. If you're poor in a rural area and you're poor in an urban area, you're still poor, and you still have a lot of the same challenges, and
right.
You need the same kind of help. And I think we need to be focusing on those things. We need to be, talking to them, having really open communication with them. I have already started reaching out to our candidates who were not successful. And the first thing I say to them is pick up your yard signs and store them. Don't throw them away. Don't
right.
make a decision this week. Don't make a decision this week. We had some really, really good candidates. And I think 2022 can look very different. But I think we need to spend the year of 21 of really developing them, getting their feet back underneath them, getting good, solid people around them to help them run a campaign, raising money, but also communicating in those communities about what Democrats really mean. Democrats really, really care about people. And I think maybe we haven't been as good about getting that message across as we could be. And we need to get better at it.
So there's a comment in the comments. Is there any hope that someone, maybe Charles Booker, can do for Kentucky what Stacey Abrams has done for Georgia?
I'm really open to that. I think Charles did an amazing campaign. And I think he did exactly what I was talking about, looking at what things we have in common, what challenges we have in common. I have some friends in the Georgia legislature, and I've already made calls saying, not now, but in a month or so, could we set up, a conversation with Miss Abrams? Because I just ordered her book. It comes on Saturday. That's tomorrow. It comes tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So I'm really, really interested in some of the strategies that she employed. I think we have a great base here in Louisville, and I think it's worth exploring what we could do in surrounding counties, building out from Louisville, building out from Lexington, building out from, the little blue dot up in Northern Kentucky.
There's one thing that I would like to point out, and I should have thought about this when Robert and I were talking earlier. One of the things that Stacey Abrams focused on was not necessarily trying to reach hardcore conservatives. Mm-hmm. It was bringing new people into the party and focusing on registrations and getting new voters. And I have long thought that one of the things we are missing is really strong voter registration, voter education work. And I hope whomever takes over the party focuses on that.
I think the Republicans have really beat us at that game, that they're on college campuses and they're recruiting and talking to young people. And, we have a much younger caucus than we've ever had. And I talked to people like Representative Josie Raymond and Representative Mackenzie Cantrell and say, we really need to take you to a Moorhead, a Murray, Western and Eastern, and talk to these young Democrats and get them involved and listen to them. That's one thing I think sometimes we don't do very well is listen to people. But let's take the show on the road a little bit. Let's we're not going to change. I don't know that we can change a Trump voter. Amy McGrath tried to do that. She tried to say that, you can vote for Trump and vote for me. Wasn't really successful, in hindsight. So, those hardcore Republicans, I don't know that we can ever win them. But gosh, there's, every year there's new people turning 18. There's new voters. And
the other thing,
young people who don't vote now, really good friend of the family, I didn't realize it, is in his 30s and voted for the first time this time.
Wow.
I was like, how did that happen? How did I not know that? So, you can't assume. You just can't assume. He voted right, though.
I'm going to throw out one other quick thing because I want to honor your time. There was a story on Daily Kos that really, really resonated with me, and I'm still trying to process what to do about it. You remember that when Bill Clinton ran for president, the famous saying was, "It's the economy, stupid." This article said the biggest political mistake Democrats have ever made, and it's the radio, stupid. And basically saying that we have entire swaths of the country where the only message they hear is right-wing radio. And you're not going to you're not going to parachute into some county 1 month before the election and overcome that. So we got to figure out how to get a message out there regularly and not just on lit, that we mail or drop. And your point about going out and taking the show on the road, I've been thinking about doing something about going to some of these small towns myself and having a open thing that I would probably call, "Here's why you need to be a Democrat," and go and talk about these things. Because I think that many of these people, I don't know how to put this. It's like somebody who's never met a gay person and they think gay people are weird. And then they meet one and they go, "Oh, well, they're just human like me."
Yeah.
And so I think there's some of that Democrat stuff. It's like, well, Democrats are weird. I don't know any Democrats, and I think we need to get out there and let them know, like you said, that we share a lot of the same problems.
I think one thing that I have been thinking a lot about for the last couple of years is the kind of the demise of local newspapers.
Yes.
And local media sources. When you get to the edges of our state, and we got a lot of edge in our state. When you get to the edges, people along that southern border are getting their news from Tennessee. People are getting their news from Virginia, and so a legislator from those areas can go to Frankfurt and do whatever the hell they want to do, and come back and tell them whatever the hell they want to tell them.
Yes.
And they have no way of being held accountable. And I think that's one thing that we've got to think about, is making sure the true story is getting back to those communities.
I think
and
that's right.
If the only outlet you have is Fox News, that's a problem for us.
Yes, it is. Okay, one last comment from the watchers. Anna White's asked, "Do we see a bigger role for county parties?"
Yes.
We can help build the party from the ground up.
Yes. In 22, when all of the state houses on the ballot and half of the Senate, all the local races are on the ballot. And what Morgan McGarvey and I have talked a lot about is having a strong Senate candidate and having strong House candidates underneath it. But even underneath that, we need strong Democrats all up and down the ballot.
Yes.
Good candidates for county judge, mayor, council, magistrate, jailer, all those things. Because each one of those Democrats brings their own group to the polls.
Yes.
And when they come to the polls, they're more than likely, not always, but more than likely going to vote straight Democrat all up and down that ballot. So we cannot, the House Democrats cannot run in isolation. The Senate Democrats can't run in isolation. We need good candidates up and down the ballot. I'm trying to develop an even stronger relationship with Emerge. My good friend Gretchen Hunt is now the executive director. But we need candidates from all walks of life. We've kind of concentrated on school teachers. We had a great farmer on the ballot that we had a couple great farmers actually on the ballot that didn't do so good, but I'm encouraging them to come back in 22. I think it's going to be, the environment will be better for us. I think having a president that doesn't spout hatred every day is going to be a big benefit to us as well.
So a lot to think about, a lot to work on. Let's hope that KDP gets stronger and takes some of this and does something with it. There's also other organizations. There's Charles Booker's organization. There's other organizations. Let's hope we can all put them together. We've got a year and a little bit to do that. Build a bench, figure out what we're doing, and get the word out.
I agree. There's no reason to duplicate efforts. I think we need to coordinate efforts.
Yeah.
And, I think we bring everybody to the table and look at what they're doing well, where they need help, where they need somebody to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And, we don't have the luxury of unlimited resources. So I'm all for it. Let's coordinate. Let's work together. Let's complement when we can and get out of the way when we should.
Representative Joni Jenkins, as I have always said, one of my favorite people. Thank you so much for being with us today. And we may bring you back in January and say, okay, how's it going? And talk about that then.
Well, and please take this virus seriously. I know a lot of people have COVID fatigue. It's a real thing. And please follow the healthy at home, the healthy at work. Wear your masks, wash your hands, keep your distance. We can't afford to lose any Democrats right now.
Yeah. Yes, very true. Representative Jenkins, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. You take care.
You too. That was Representative Joni Jenkins, the leader of the Democrats in the State House, with lots of good ideas and lots of good words for us. We also want to thank Robert Kahne for being with us earlier. We are thinking about what's the best time to have this show. And if you have any ideas on that, please send them to tips, TIPS, @forwardky.com. And of course, if you like what you see, we would love for you to become a member. forwardky.com/join. That's pretty simple. Or you can just go to the site at the top where it says join. Thanks for joining us, and be with us next week. Bye-bye.